Welcome to the Mental Health Multiverse.
We're your hosts,
HB
and LB.
We'll be breaking down some of our favorite movies and TV shows as they relate to mental health, self-healing, and overall wellness, while also breaking stigmas, shedding light on misinterpretations, and helping you understand yourself a little better.
If you're also on a healing journey and enjoy pop culture, stick around.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Mental Health Multiverse. I am HB here with my co-host, LB. Hello, LB.
Hello.
And we are here today to talk about Mulan, the Disney princess Mulan, which is LB's favorite princess.
Whoop, whoop. I'm so excited.
Yeah.
And I have a little brother, like a little brother plushie here. I had a Pua last episode, and now I have that one here. For listeners who are not watching this on YouTube, I also have a Mulan shirt on. I have Mulan paintings and prints behind me. So hop over to YouTube to see all those. And then maybe you'll also see all of my Mulan figurines because I have so many.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that it's very obvious that this is your favorite Disney princess.
Yes. I definitely, when I got older, though, I definitely had that period of questioning whether or not she was actually my favorite. You know, how sometimes you grow up and think certain things are your favorite things, either because your friends liked it or your family liked it or whatever. And then you get older and kind of become your own person, and then you start questioning everything. I'm like, is Mulan actually my favorite? But I watch it religiously, probably daily. That's not even it's not even an exaggeration. I have so much merch. This isn't even like my only Mulan shirt. And I have one of the cups here that says the flower that blooms in adversity is the most beautiful, most rare and beautiful of all. And then I have a little teacup with Cricky. I should have grabbed it, but it's too far. With Cricky in it. Oh, and I have a Mulan Man, I have so much
She's just going to keep going and going and going and going.
This episode is going to be all about LB's Mulan merch. Welcome.
We're just going to hold it up and be like, we got this in X place. No, it's funny you have the little brother plushie. Is that the dog's name? Little Brother?
Yes, his name is Little Brother, which I think was inspired. So we'll probably get into this later, but Disney took many, many liberties with the original ballad. So it's not accurate. It's a little problematic, but in the original ballad poem, whatever you want to call it, she had a younger sibling, and I believe she had a younger brother. So she doesn't have any siblings in this movie. She had a younger sister in the live action, but we don't talk about that one. But anyway, yes, okay. Sorry.
So I watched this last night to sort of jog my memory to talk about for today. And I forgot that Little Brother existed. I was like, there's a dog in this? What?
Yes. She has many animal sidekicks. It's great.
She does. Another thing I wrote down as notes was wow, this is heavy on the Disney sidekick front. She's got a horse. She's got Mushu. She's got Cricky. She's got Little Brother. There's so many. I know that this is getting ahead of ourselves, but I personally think that Cricky is one of the most underrated Disney sidekicks of all time.
Oh my God, he's hilarious.
I just love the how Mushu is so supportive of Cricky. You are a lucky bug. You really are a lucky bug. It's just, yeah. I have a lot to say about Mushu being supportive, but before we get there, why don't we talk about, so Mulan came out in 1998. So I was, depending on the date, which I don't have exactly, but depending on the date, I was either 8 or 9 when it came out, but I never saw it as a child. At least I don't recall seeing it as a child. So I don't have a connection to Mulan when it comes to my childhood. I watched Mulan as an adult because I had heard the song I'll Make a Man Out of You so many times and was like, I want to know what this is from and understand. And so I watched it maybe in my early 20s. And I remember really liking it, but I also remember that I was watching it while I was making food and wasn't totally 100% paying attention. And I remember again, laughing, thinking it was good, thinking wow, how did I sleep on this for so long? But upon like rewatching it again last night, I definitely think that it was ahead of its time for when it came out. And I'm kind of like
Totally.
sad that I didn't get to experience it as a kid because I do think it's a really lovely um I think it's a really lovely movie. So that's my experience seeing Mulan for the first time. Like nothing special. It didn't feel life changing or anything, but I
Mm-hmm.
have grown upon like rewatching it to really like I do think that it is definitely up at the top of my list now. Especially looking at it through the lens of what we do in this podcast of like what are the themes? How can this help with personal development and all of that? I think specifically looking at it through that lens, it's like a really powerful movie. So, what was since it is your favorite, what was your experience? How old were you when you saw it for the first time?
So, well, just going back onto what you said, the release date was June 5th, 1998. So
Okay.
I was actually 3. I wasn't even 3, I was 2.5 because I was born October 95.
Okay.
But to what you were saying about wishing like you had seen it as a kid because it was so like groundbreaking and ahead of its time, and it was like despite all of its problems, it was culturally significant in terms of representation, and like we touched on kind of in the last episode, representation is kind of a tricky thing. But anyway, um, I think even if you had seen it as a kid, it wouldn't have had because I saw it as a kid and I didn't think like, oh wow, this was really ahead of its time. I think that's really only a perspective we can have later on, all of that to say like it's okay you didn't see it as a kid, and I think you saw it when you needed to see it, right? Even if it wasn't like, wow, this changed my life. It's like, oh, wow, I saw it and like now I can have this like different perspective of it because I saw it as a kid, a lot of my perspective is kind of, I have a lot of nostalgia in it. It's really hard for me to see some of the faults. You know what I mean? Like, I think nostalgia can kind of cloud our judgment in some ways. But now that I
Mhm.
am older and I can look at things with a more critical eye, I can accept the both and.
Yeah.
But my personal experience, so I saw the movie 6 times in theaters thanks to my grandparents. I did not think I was going to get emotional. Wow. So my grandfather passed a few months ago, actually last month. And wow. Oh, I wasn't expecting to
Oh.
go there.
Oh. I'm hugging you.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess at 2.5, I just really attached to that movie and I begged my grandparents to see it. But it was really sweet because my grandpa and I would play swords. Um, and he would be like Shan Yu and I'd be Mulan, and we'd use scratchers and I'd jump from one piece of furniture to the other. But my grandma didn't know about this until very, very recently. She had no idea. I used to jump from this armchair to the couch, which was like 2 feet away from each other. It was not a big deal, but she found out and she was like, "You did what?" And I was like, "We didn't do anything. No, it's fine." But I guess I guess I really gravitated toward her even at such a young age because I this is so embarrassing. I don't think I've ever confessed this in like a public way. I demanded everyone call me Mulan. Like I was not Marissa. I was Mulan. And I think it's because I had like this natural gravitation toward like strong independent women, I guess. Because I don't know if you've seen Prince of Egypt. Also love that movie, fantastic movie. There's a woman in it named Zipporah, and she's very feisty and overall like a very badass woman anyway. And I when that came out and I saw it, I was in preschool at that time. I demanded everyone call me Zipporah.
Oh my gosh.
What
Adorable.
that's about. Maybe that's something I need to talk with my therapist about. Like, why did I do that? I don't know. Um, but anyway, easily my favorite movie because I definitely relate to her and her situation so much, about like trying to please her family and prove that she can do things right. And even that line in A Girl Worth Fighting For, when she says, like, how about a girl that's got a brain who always speaks her mind? I really like that, especially because I grew up in spaces where I couldn't and I couldn't really be myself. But then also, fun fact, the colors and the magnolia themes throughout the movie definitely influenced my brand of Little Bit Not Broken.
Aw. You really carried it with you. And it also sounds like to me, it sounds like your grandfather really gave you that like safe space to be yourself, even though you were like only 3 or 2.5 or whatever. Like he was sort of like, we're gonna play this game and I'll call you Mulan and whatever. And then it's like, oh, but it's just our thing. We're not gonna tell grandma, we're not gonna tell
Yeah.
your parents, that kind of thing. I think that's really sweet and really cute.
Yeah, he definitely was one of the few people that let me be a kid. Oh God. But since you recently rewatched it and something we talked about with Moana, why do you like Mulan?
Oh man, I really like her because I think what's so cool about the movie in general is that it really plays with gender stereotypes a lot, which I know we're going to get into
Mm,
when we talk
mm-hmm,
about themes and things like
mm-hmm,
that. But like, I am just so impressed. And I know that she didn't go into it with any sort of like, I'm going to prove that I'm strong enough or I'm going to prove that I can be a man or anything like that. Like, that wasn't her intention going into it. But I do love that she was the smartest person in their um I want to say battalion, but I don't like in their group. I
yeah.
don't know what the what the word is in their troops. She was the smartest person and she really like even though she felt like she didn't fit in and she had to hide, like she really showed up with 100% and I just am like, it's pretty impressive to see that and to know that like she didn't go into it to like say that she had anything to prove, but like what she was looking for essentially was like to see something in the mirror because she really didn't feel like the way that she had to present herself to the world was authentic to who she was. And
Mm-hmm,
she thought that by going on this journey, she would figure herself out and find out. But that journey didn't give her the answer she was looking for. Right. Um, and so I don't know. I think I just really like the going for it because it feels right rather than like
mm,
overthinking, rather than like, like I have something to prove. It's really just more like, this is what I feel like I need to do. So I'm going to do it. Like, whether it's for my family, for my honor, for my father, for whatever. Like, um, and then, obviously in the end, she does sort of self-discover. But yeah, I think that's sort of why I like Mulan.
no, those are really good points. I think we can watch this movie and be like, oh yeah, she was like trying to prove herself. But really, if you think about it, her intention was never to become like the best warrior. It was just really to protect her father and to take his place, you know?
Yeah.
And it really, like you mentioned, and I think we talked about with Moana too, and I think this is why I really like both of them. Um, Nothing they do is very self-serving because they're not trying to like gain, especially at the end when she's like presenting the gifts to from the emperor to her father. There's no like, and look at this and look at that. There's a lot of like humility, and a lot
Mhm.
of I think the note I wrote was there's a lot of like penance was the word I came up with, but I don't think that's exactly right because that makes it, well, maybe it is because she's also kind of asking for forgiveness for
Yeah.
leaving and breaking the law. So um
Yeah, and I mean like, it's the whole theme throughout is that like bring honor, bring honor. And I think for her, she thought that those gifts at the end were the honor that he was looking for, like,
mhm,
you
mhm.
know, and it's like, okay, here are the physical representations of honor that because it's literally like a song, she'll bring honor to us all.
Mhm.
And then the big tearful moment when her dad just wanted her back and is like, the greatest gift and honor is having you for a daughter. And you're like,
And before we move into themes, I just wanted to echo what you said and kind of the reasons why I like Mulan. She's very determined. She's very funny, and witty and headstrong, also physically strong, also very clever and creative. And I think that's another reason why she's or reasons why she's my favorite because she's awesome and she's a badass and she can kick ass.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I like her for those reasons as well. I think obviously as a fitness professional, love seeing strong women shown in media. Like I love seeing like that she was just as capable, if not the most capable,
Mhm.
um, in the army. And it's just like seeing that kind of stuff, you know, the whole montage of when I'll Make a Man Out of You is playing, and they're trying to figure out like, how do we be warriors? How do we be a man? Like, what does it mean to be a man? And she's like excelling at all of these things. Well, she's not like, it takes time, but she like, you know, they all start to excel at the things that make them a man. And for them, that definition is like, you know, being strong, lifting heavy things, throwing things, climbing things, jumping across fire, you know, like all of that. Like that makes you a man. And she became a man in quotes, like so to speak, in the terms of the. And I just think for someone who is like in fitness, I think women a lot of times they there's this like big masculine versus feminine sort of thing
Mm,
that happens in fitness where like, you know, like the men know what they're doing and the women don't, which like of course is not true, but like a lot of unsolicited advice happens in gyms where like a man will walk up to a woman and be like, "Oh, you're doing your
mhm.
squats wrong," and like, "Oh, you're doing this wrong." And it's like, "No, I'm actually a fitness professional. Like I know what I'm doing. You can walk away now. Thanks." Like don't ask don't give me unsolicited advice. If I need help, I will ask, and I will probably ask another woman, not
Mhm.
you, sir.
Or even the myth that like weightlifting is only for men because it'll make women bulky. Like
Yeah.
when I started my fitness journey, I was doing a lot of like cardio and high intensity interval training and stuff because I thought that's what women were supposed to do, right? And it wasn't until I think I followed Kelsey Wells on Instagram, and she was like lifting weight, and I was like, "Ooh, I'm going to try this because why not?" And I started weightlifting, and that was when I really started noticing a difference and a change. And it wasn't even like, "Ooh, I wanted to be skinny or whatever." Like truly weightlifting helped me feel strong and confident and empowered in a lot of ways. So for anyone listening who thinks weightlifting is going to make you bulky and you want to try it, just try it. Just try it.
Yeah. It's not. That's exactly it. It's like, you know, e- everybody has a different body composition, and it depends on what you
Mhm.
eat and how you work out. And like, so if you're a woman who like wants to gain a lot of muscle and get like very bulky, like you can. It
Yeah.
is possible. Like if you want to be a bodybuilder and join bodybuilding competitions and all of that, like it is possible. You just have to exercise and eat a very specific way. But like the general feminine body in general, when you lift weights and eat, you know, a regular, you know, nutrient dense
Mhm.
diet, like
Mhm.
your body pretty much just like it takes the definition, it like, you know, um for the most part. I mean, like, of course, I mean, there are also a lot of plus size weightlifters as well, like heavy
Totally.
lifting, heavy,
Mhm.
like, you know, all of that. And it's because, like, you know, muscle lives in and around and under fat. So, you know, it's just interesting because like body composition is different for every body, and it just depends
Truly.
on who you are and how you do. But I do think that, like, you know, there is just this common misconception of like what is acceptable for men versus what is acceptable for women. And I think that's why Mulan really resonates with me, is because it does sort of get rid of that line between the two. And it's
Mhm.
like the woman is just as capable as the man, if not
Truly.
more capable, question mark, you know.
Exactly.
And,
Yeah. And just to go back to your
um,
point about every body, having a different composition, I saw this post and I wish I screenshotted it because I wanted to send it to you, but it essentially said like even if we all worked out and ate exactly the same, we'd all have different bodies.
uh-huh. I talk about that all the time. I talk about it all the time in
Hmm.
Geeknasium because like I am a fitness professional. I exercise as part of my job. I teach fitness classes. I have a workout program. You know, it's like part of my habit identity, who I am, because it's what I do. And my body type, when you would look at me, you know, you wouldn't necessarily, in terms of society standards, you wouldn't necessarily be like, yes, that is a fitness professional. But it is
Hmm.
just because of my genetics, and it's also like the type of lifestyle that I live. Like
Mm-hmm.
if I wanted to, I could be, like going on all sorts of fad crash crazy to look a certain way, but that's not how I want to live my life. And that's not what I want to represent for my clients. So, I would rather live in a larger body and be a fitness professional that exists in a larger body than like try to fit into that mold that society puts on you, which I had tried to do in the past, and it was miserable and did not work for me. And I was not eating enough and almost passed out while I was teaching. So like, it's definitely like it's definitely something that I um talk about a lot, because on the internet you can get a lot of hate for being a fitness professional that exists in a larger body. Like people will just be
Mm-hmm.
like, just lose weight, why are you so fat, like why don't you diet, like all this stuff. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
first of all, you don't know me, so go away.
You can
But
fuck
also
right
second,
off.
but yeah, but like what people think is that like I want to hire someone who looks a certain way because they can
I want to
teach
look
me
like
how to look
them. Mm-hmm.
like them. But
Yeah.
the problem there is that like they are not you. They have a completely different genetic makeup. Their
Mm-hmm.
metabolism is different. There's just so much different about, and it's like I can still help you reach your goals whatever they are, regardless of what I look like, because I will work with you. I'm not working with
Mm-hmm.
me. I'm working with you. Um
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so I mean
Mm-hmm.
that's the big thing for me as a fitness professional, is just like we find what works for you and what feels good for you. Um and that is how we move that's how we move forward. But I do think, like, to rewind all the way back to like weightlifting and strength training and all of that, like for me, I like feeling strong. Like feeling strong feels good to me. And so I think for people, a lot of people, like when they first start a fitness journey, they approach it from a place where it's like, I'm not good enough, so I need to lose weight so that I can be so that people will like me more, that I can be better, or that society will accept me more. Like that's where a lot of people start. And if you want to equate that to Mulan, really, I mean, she joined the army because she didn't feel enough. She didn't see, oh my gosh, there's that dramatic scene where she's sitting on the dragon and crying in the rain.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, and I think like that's where a lot of people start with fitness. It's like, I'm upset and I don't feel enough and I don't feel good. And
It comes from a
and
place of
then
like lack instead of um empowerment.
empowerment.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so like, and then she's just like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to cut my hair. I'm going to take off and I'm going to join the army. And that's where people are like, okay, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to go to the gym. I'm going to get a gym membership. I'm going to go and I'm going to do it. And then when she first gets there, it's like, well, first of all, she's got Mushu telling her to do all of the wrong things. And I will equate that to influencers on the internet telling you what to do, even though they aren't certified in anything. You're
Drink
just
skinny
listening to
teas
someone.
and
Yeah,
and
like, so
take
that's Mushu in the ear, sort of being like, oh, punch him in the face. And it's like, no, don't listen to Mushu. Mushu is not a trained fitness professional. Okay.
he's not even a
Don't,
certified guardian anymore. Like
yeah, exactly. Like, don't listen to don't listen to the influencers online who just get these promotions because they look a certain way, like blah, 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 blah,
Mhm.
blah. And then once you really connect to like what works for you, what feels good for you, you start to feel more empowered. You're using your own mind rather than doing what other people tell you, which is that journey that she goes through
Mhm.
when she's in the army, right? And then at the end, when she's like, she sort of like just she thinks like, okay, this is a dire situation. Like the Huns are coming at us. They're like quadruple our army, maybe like so many of them. And she was like, oh, I can start an avalanche. Like that's the type of thinking that is like, you can start thinking that way when you have a more empowered relationship with fitness. It's like, oh, I actually don't feel like working out today. Maybe I'll do a stretch. Maybe I'll go for a walk. Maybe I'll do this. It's like that sort of empowered thinking comes after you develop a more healthy relationship with fitness. So that is, I guess, my long-winded tangent about how we can relate fitness to Mulan. Yay, end of TED Talk.
Look at that. In this paper, I will. No, you nailed it. Truly. I wish I could just as beautifully kind of equate that to a healing journey, but essentially we would just have to talk about the movie because it's very similar. You know, there are going to be a lot of ups and downs, a lot of setbacks. You will try, you will fail, but that's truly all part of the journey. But speaking of like journeys and themes, while we're on the subject of like gender roles and stereotypes, it's definitely a theme I noticed, or gender norms. Because I wrote down a lot of parts and like lines and quotes and lyrics that kind of stood out to me about how this movie like magnified so much of the gender norms, especially in the 90s, right? Like in the 90s, it was like women are supposed to be super, super skinny and like with the cheekbones and then like basically not even exist, and look like they're on the verge of just flying away in the wind. But I mean, even in like the opening scene when Mulan is writing notes on her arm, and she's like quiet, demure, graceful, polite, delicate, refined, poised, punctual. And then the rooster crows and she's like, oh shit, I gotta go do my chores now. I think in that's still definitely a norm or a stereotype that women are confronted with, you know, especially like the quiet and polite. Like when women are assertive, they're deemed as bitchy or bossy or difficult or whatever. Um, Also, when she's getting in oh my gosh, in honor to us all, when she's getting dressed, or the people are dressing her and they're like tiny waist, and I was like, ugh, I don't like
Yeah.
that. But that was like the thing. And then the line in that same song about like a boy, or how people bring honor in this society, in this culture, is like a boy by bearing arms and a girl by bearing sons. I didn't notice that before, and I was like, eh, eh.
Yeah.
And that is the external representation of honor in this situation anyway. um but yeah, what you were saying about how men are supposed to be tough, women are supposed to be quiet, basically one of those like, you know, seen not heard kind of situations. But I do like, while we're on this topic, what I did like was how Sean Yu was so unfazed about a woman beating him and besting him. And I think, and I saw a post, and I don't know if this is accurate, because I'm not familiar with the culture or the history or anything like that. But I did see a post that said, the reason why is because historically, um, the Huns and the armies in Mongolia had female warriors and commanders and people in the army. So this was like, it did not phase him at all.
Ah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All
Which I
right.
didn't
That
know.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think my favorite thing, so like, yes, all of these like gender roles and stereotypes are like quite disgusting if you're thinking about it. Like, ugh, gross. I hate that this is coming up. But I think that what I like is that the whole movie is sort of pointing at that, pointing it out and being
And
like,
then
we need to
undoes
flip
it. Yeah.
this
Yeah.
on its head. Yeah. That's sort of like, because I was thinking that too, those lines, those like small lines about like having the tiny waist and all of that, like they stuck out to me.
Mm-hmm.
And even in like a girl worth fighting for, I was like, all of these lines, I hate everything that all of them are saying, but I know that this song exists to point out the fact that this is not an okay way of thinking.
Yes.
Which is inherently a sort of like feminist way of thinking. But it does it the tricky part about it is that like most of the song is the icky yucky stuff, and there's like only one or two lines that sort of like point to the fact that this is not okay, right?
Right. But also, it's
So
just a
it's
really
like,
catchy song.
no, it's true, and like I just think I think that it's interesting that the movie is definitely sort of like pointing all of this out and being like, why are we doing this? And why are we doing this? And why are we doing that?
Mm-hmm.
And like, if we want to get into more of the problematic stuff, like, I think another reason I think that this was like both ahead of its time and also still a little problematic is like they use the term cross-dresser a lot.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And like I think there's a lot of like switching gender like clothing and making fun of the fact that the person is in the clothing of the opposite gender. Like that is a little bit
Mm-hmm.
upsetting and messed up. But what I did like about like at the end when all of her like army friends get into the woman's clothing and put their makeup on and everything, they didn't question it at all. They just like
Right.
did it. And that's what made me think like, oh, this is so ahead of its time because I feel like they could have been like, what? I'm not gonna put
Yeah.
on women's clothes and made
It's
a big
definitely
deal out of it, but they just like did it. And I was
yeah.
like pretty surprised by that looking on and being like, this could have been made worse. Is it great? No. Do they still sort of like poke fun at the fact that these guys are dressed as women? Yes. But it's not as bad as it could have been in the 90s.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. And I think too, so much of what we're talking about kind of leads into another theme, which is like culture and family and tradition, because a lot of this is breaking and disrupting a lot of that. And I know that it was uncomfortable for a lot of people, not just in like the Asian American community or the Asian community, but like probably just any community or culture that upholds this like um this way of thinking of like boys are supposed to be like this, girls are supposed to be like this, or the uh, hierarchical structure of family and like listening to your elders no matter what and things like that because when Mulan leaves and goes to join the or like yeah goes to replace her goes to take her father's place in the army and the ancestors all come out and the guy with the acabus, is that what it's called? And he's like,
Yeah,
dishonor will
yeah.
come. Yeah, he's like, dishonor will come to the family, traditional values will disintegrate. And it really reminded me of this quote from a book I'm reading called Permission to Come Home by Dr. Jenny Wong. And it's reclaiming mental health as Asian Americans, which is as soon as I found this book, I was like, and I follow her on Instagram, and like when I saw she was coming out with the book, I was like, this is gonna be groundbreaking and life changing because so much of mental health and I think psychology and self help and personal development does unfortunately come from like a white cis place and perspective. And a lot of it is like just say no to your family and just set boundaries and put yourself first and like choose you, which is all great. And yes, you can definitely do that. And in a culture or in a community that is built upon generations of community first, it's really hard. And so if you don't mind, I'm just going to read some of her what she says about that because she puts it way more eloquently and beautifully and more articulate than I could. Um, and if you have the book, you can follow along. It's on page 87. We're going to be talking about actually just kidding. I'm not going to read all of these pages because it's like 3 pages. We're going to skip to 88. Okay. So, this is why, for those of us born to Asian immigrants, setting boundaries might be so difficult. There may be no shared belief that boundaries should even exist because self sacrifice for the collective benefit is viewed as the honorable and dutiful path. When your parents have sacrificed so much, the act of saying no can induce an incredible amount of guilt and shame. And then skipping down a little bit, the deeply embedded hierarchical structure of Asian communities can make it feel like we can never say no to an elder, even in the face of abuse, mistreatment, or toxic behavior. But at what cost? What if, instead, we did the harder work of teaching others where our boundaries are and showing them how to be in a relationship with us in a way that works for both of us? And I love all of that. Mm, mm, mm. I love this book. I'm still working on it, but I really like that when we're talking about culture and family and community versus individualism. I think it's really important we can acknowledge the both and of, acknowledging that this is the way it has been, this is the tradition, this is the culture, and it's detrimental to my health, it's detrimental to my relationship with my family that I want to be a part of, and these people that I want to be in community with and love, but I can't keep self-sacrificing for their benefit. And I think that is kind of the place Mulan comes to by the end of the movie, is realizing like I I am allowed to be myself. And it's really beautiful that her father accepts that and is like, and like the quote we said earlier, having you as a daughter is the greatest honor of all. I think I butchered that line, but that's okay.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that the comment that he made that is sort of like the catalyst into her going into the army, right? Where he says, I know my place. It's time you learned yours. Like, it speaks so much to what you were just saying about like she is speaking her mind, and in a way she's sort of saying you like I don't think that you should do this. Like, she wants him to behave selfishly because she selfishly
Yes.
wants to keep her dad, like she knows that if he goes to war he's going to die
Right.
or get very injured, or something will happen to him because he is already not well. He has a cane. I don't think they ever explain. It's just like he's old,
It's an
can't
old
walk
war
well.
injury.
Yeah. So like, you know, he's not fit to go to war. And so she is coming from a place of selfishness, or what would be seen as
Mm-hmm.
selfishness in the culture of like, I don't want you to go. I want you to stay because if you go, you're going to die. And then he's like, but he's coming from that place of like, it is literally my duty to go and I will be going. Like, I am behaving how I am supposed to. Why can't you behave how
Mm-hmm.
you're supposed to? And it's that sort of like, I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm going to war. You need to like sit down and shut up and know your place. And like, of course he doesn't say all that, but in so many words he kind of does.
But
Um,
essentially, yeah. And I wrote this down that scene always gets to me because it leads into her crying on the statue. But there's
the most
so
dramatic scene.
most dramatic, dare I say, almost more dramatic than Ariel throwing herself over the rock and sobbing, or Sleeping Beauty on her bed or whatever, like
I would
crying in
agree.
the rain on a statue. It's
In the middle of a thunderstorm. Yeah, 100%. So
pretty
dramatic.
pretty dramatic. But there is so much betrayal in her face because it seems like he was finally accepting who and where she was in life, because right before that is the scene, like right before he's drafted into the war, they're sitting under the magnolia tree, and he's like, oh, we have a late bloomer, but I bet when it blooms it'll be the most beautiful of all, right? And so she's like, oh, you're accepting that, I haven't figured myself out yet, I haven't figured out my life, and I haven't figured out how to bring honor to this family, but like, you're patient with me, cool. um so I think when she's crying about this, it's to me, I think you can see it either way, but in this most recent watch, I kind of saw it as less about like her crying over the outburst, but more because of the confusion and fear and pressure around who she's supposed to be and how quickly now it feels like she needs to get there. Like, okay, he's figured out his place and he's known his place now for a while, and I haven't figured it out yet. So I'm behind. Or I'm, again, like, unworthy. I'm less than. Like, this is a negative thing. Um,
Mhm.
so that's kind of how I saw that scene. And I think that then also leads us into another theme of identity and perfectionism,
Yeah.
because in that same scene, the outburst, she's like, so you'll die for honor? And he's like, I'll die doing what's right. And it's equating what is right with what is honorable, but she's like, who is dictating what is right? Who is dictating our honor? Who's saying this is the way it's supposed to be? She's very much like a disruptor in that kind of way, and I think that's why I like her, because I'm like, yeah, who's saying this stuff? Who says this is how it's supposed to be? Because I'm very much the same way, and like we talked about in the last episode, that's what I said to my own father of like, why does it have to be this way? Why are you setting this rule that is negatively impacting me? And I can see you're not comfortable with it either. Anyway, we talked about that before. If you didn't hear it, go back to the MULAN episode. But like obviously there are things that you should and shouldn't do, right? We all have that moral compass. But I think in a lot of cases we have to take a step back and ask ourselves, like, who is saying this? Who says that this is the way things have to be, which is another nuanced question. But in Mulan's case, I think there's a lot of cultural aspects into why things are the way they are. And again, just like that quote I read from the book, it's there is or there can be a way to navigate the both and of acknowledging that this is the way things have been and asserting the boundary that they no longer have to be this way and we can work together to find a common ground.
Yeah. It also reminds me, I know when when we first started this episode, it will probably be in the bloopers, we were talking about Simu Liu. And his book also talks about this a lot because his parents did not want him to be an actor. Like he is very much a disruptor for his parents as well. And like the book, if you haven't read Simu's book, it is, I think it's called We Were Dreamers, We Are Dreamers, something like that. And he is,
Yes,
it's a very, We Were Dreamers. Yeah. It's a very candid look on his upbringing and how culture played a lot in not only his Chinese culture but also his Canadian culture as well, like playing in both.
Mm-hmm.
And how and the like expectations that come. And I think that I don't have the book in front of me. I actually listened to it, so I wouldn't be able to like read it anyway. But I do think that his book is another really great example of like finding the both. And I think he still to this day, he talks about it, he makes jokes about it, but he still today like struggles to prove himself to his parents because he didn't become a doctor. He's like, I bought them a car because I am the lead actor in a Marvel movie. And they still ask me, like, but when are we getting grandkids? You know, like things like that. So I think it's just like like his is less of an intellectual study, like the coming home one, but it's definitely like it's like a very similar take on the finding both because he's talking from his experiences of like I had to go against my parents a lot to become who I am today, and it doesn't feel good all the time.
Totally. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of like guilt and shame. And I think fear, especially because at least my parents did this to me, where it was like, if I go against the grain, then I'm cut off. I'm pushed out from under their umbrella. I'm on my own. Like, okay, you want to go against our rules and go against tradition and culture and whatever, then fine, go on your own. And you're like abandoned. And that's really scary. Not just because we're human beings wired for survival, but also because like you're a child. And so being
Yeah.
threatened with the fact that like, okay, you're on your own, it's like, what do I do? And I also want to
Yeah.
make the note, like we're using the word disruptor, which can have a negative connotation, but we're really using it as like an empowered disruptor, I guess more of like a cycle breaker. So I just wanted
Yeah.
to like clear that up. And also, first of all, I haven't read We Were Dreamers, but now I'm adding it to my list. It's gonna be on my wish list. I have so
Yeah.
many books to read, but I would love to read that.
No, I think you should. I think that you would resonate with a lot of what he
Mm,
talks about.
mm,
And
okay.
I also highly recommend listening to the audiobook version because he also narrates it. So, yeah.
And
But
you were
maybe
just
I
like
just
a
like hearing
puddle
his
the entire
voice.
time. Yeah, that's fair. That's fine. He does have a really nice voice. Also, while we are on the subject of perfectionism, this I wrote this down as like a small note or a small detail. I really like how she always has this like one hair out of place, and you can't see it right now because I have headphones on, but I also have a very similar hair. So anytime I put my hair up or have my hair like whatever I have my hair, I always have this one piece of hair just like down here, and I never know what it's like a baby hair, and I like have never figured out what to do with it. Um, but in my most recent watch through, it reminded me of Azula from Avatar: The Last Airbender. I know you haven't seen it yet, or you haven't watched it as religiously as I have. We're gonna get there. I really do hope one of our seasons can be all about Avatar because I love that show so much.
Listen, I'm not against it. It was like I would
You just,
watch it when it was
yeah,
on when I was a kid, but like, or younger. I guess I wasn't a kid, but like I never just sat and watched all of it, so I couldn't tell you plot lines.
that's okay. I didn't watch it as a kid either. I binged it in 2020 when it hit Netflix, like so many other people, and I immediately fell in love with it, and now I have a tattoo of it. And anyway, it's so interesting. I got a tattoo of Avatar before I got a tattoo of Mulan, and mainly that's because I still haven't figured out what exactly I want. Like, I've been thinking, do I want a sword? Do I want a quote? Do I want a little Mushu? I don't know. I haven't figured it out. But anyway, before I get distracted with that, the reason why her hair reminded me of Azula is because I'm trying to do this like spoiler free. Azula is like a firebending prodigy, and she's really really good to the point where her fire is effortlessly blue, and blue is, just even scientifically like the hottest of fire, I guess. And there's a scene where she's practicing her firebending in front of, I don't know who exactly they are, if they're her counselors, if they're her mentors, if they're just like her babysitters or something. But there are these two older women named oh Lee and Lo. I hope I'm getting that right. I'm so sorry if I'm not. Um, and she's firebending and she's like doing really, really well. And in her final like stance or whatever, they're like, "Good job, Princess Azula. Everything was great, except for that one hair." And there's one hair out of place. And that's the thing that they touch on. And she's like, "Ugh." And it foreshadows a lot of things that happen at the end. I'm not going to spoil it, but I really like that detail of Mulan either purposefully putting that hair there or having it just there, because I don't know, it's like this subtle design thing where I'm like, "Oh, she's like not put together and perfect, and she's not trying to be, and she embraces that to an extent, right?" It's like it's kind of like consciously we can know something, but subconsciously we might be still operating out of these limiting beliefs about either ourselves or the world or whatever, even though consciously we know, like, no, this isn't okay. Like when she confronts her father about joining the army, she's like, "You shouldn't have to go," because she knows, but subconsciously, wait, I lost my train of thought there. Anyway, whatever. All of that to say, I like that little note and that kind of like parallel.
Yeah, I mean, it reminds you, it's like a subtle hint of imperfection and the fact that she like pulls her hair down to make it imperfect. Even when she's at the very beginning, when she's supposed to be presenting herself and like showing that she is the perfect daughter, right? Like, I'm gonna pour the tea perfectly and I'm gonna have my things memorized and whatever. But like, even when they do her hair, she pulls it down and she's like, nope, I'm gonna have a little twirl of hair down because I'm not perfect. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It also reminds me of Merida, or I guess Merida reminded me of that when she's getting dressed and her mom puts the hood on her, and she's doing it out of like rebellion, and she like pulls that hair down. She's like, "Nah." But Mulan is just like, "No, this is
Yeah.
like a thing I do. This is my thing, and I want to
Yeah. This
feel
is
like, even when I'm like done up with makeup and I'm wearing clothes that I don't really love, that don't feel like me, I'm gonna try and
make
find a
them my
balance."
own.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Make them my own. Yeah.
Yeah. But something that we haven't, it's like kind of related, but we haven't like really touched on is like her parents toe that line between like being supportive and not being supportive in a way. It's same
Mm.
with her grandmother, because it's like her grandmother sort of comes in and is like, I know she's gonna mess up, so I got her this lucky cricket. But then like at the end, her grandmother's also like, oh, you brought a sword, why couldn't you bring a man or something? Like, I can't remember what the end exactly what she
Yes.
says, but it's something like, why didn't she bring a man home? So it's like I feel like all of the adults in her life sort of toe that line between like being supportive and not being supportive, like at the same time. It's like it is kind of living in that and living in the middle that we've been talking about. But one thing that I was surprised by watching it, to get back to talking about like her sidekicks and like the support that she had from like the animals that were around her, like the horse, that Mushu consistently calls a cow, which I think is hilarious. Dishonor on you, dishonor on your cow. It's perfect. It's a perfect quote. But anyway, I think that like even though they're kind of dumb, they set off the firework. They are really just like they're really kind of like insufferable, but they also are very supportive of her. Like Mushu makes her happy porridge for breakfast, like with the eggs and the smiley face bacon. And I'm like, that is just the darndest, sweetest little thing. Um, and he also says, like, when she's looking in the mirror after the war or whatever, and she's like,
Her
I thought
helmet.
that this would change. Yeah, I said the mirror. It is her helmet. You are correct.
I mean, it's a reflection, but we just want to clear up it's a
Yeah,
helmet.
she's looking at her. Thank you. She's looking at her helmet, and she sort of is like, oh, I'm nothing. I don't see anything. And Mushu just goes up to her and he's like, that's because it just needs a little spit. That's all. Let me shine this up for you. Look at you. You're so pretty. I was like, that's so supportive. Like, it's just like, it was so beautiful and also kind of like unexpected, I think, to see that like she's getting that support because, they've all failed, right? Like I think that's another really beautiful thing is that like they all kind of celebrate their failures. Mulan failed. I mean, she succeeded, but feels like she failed.
Yeah.
It's like
In some ways, she
whatever.
did kind of fail her objective of hiding the fact that she's a woman. Failed.
Yeah.
Keeping her father safe in the army. I mean, she succeeded in that, and she got kicked out of the
Yeah.
army, which in some ways is actually kind of success because apparently in this movie, it's punishable by death. So
Right. Yeah. She hurt Li Shang, which who wants to do that? But anyway, but like, and then Cricky like admits, I am not a lucky cricket, and Mushu admits he's like, I'm actually not your guardian, and I, like, I was banned
yes.
from being a guardian, like, like they're all just like sort of failures in a way, but it's like, just like the way that they've all sort of come together to support each other that I think is really beautiful, and I think it's also representative of the importance of having community and family outside of family, like finding and creating your own family where you need it, where you will get that support, where your family might be living in that middle space, that other and whatever that we've been talking about, where it's like they are trying to support you, but you are
But
existing
it only
so
goes
much
so
out of
far. Yeah.
like you're existing so far out of their norm that they don't know how, and it hurts them sometimes to see you behave in certain ways, and like it's just, I think, a really beautiful example of like you need to find that support sometimes outside of your family, or find people who know what you're going through or can help what you're going through, because they will uplift you and support you and spit on your helmet and tell you you're pretty.
Yes, exactly. Your chosen family is so important. I love that you brought that up. Thank you.
Yeah. And I mean, if we want to talk about Li Shang a little more, I don't know why I have a crush on a Disney character. Get out of here. Go away.
I mean, haven't we all? We all at one point have had crushes on
Wait,
fictional animated characters.
can I tell you that when I was a child, my Disney crush was Pongo from the 101 Dalmatians?
That's fine because I crushed on Kovu from Simba's Pride Lion King 2.
Oh,
Oh
oh
no.
man.
Oh no.
We were weird. Okay, anyway, back to the subject at hand. I also just want to bring up that like I think one of the themes of the movie that stayed through the end to Li Shang sort of like talking to the emperor at the end, and of course I can't remember the exact line, maybe you'll know, but the emperor is like, you don't meet a girl like that every dynasty, there you go. You don't meet a girl like that every. I feel like it's just like also representative of like men just sometimes need a nudge, he loved her. He
Yes.
loved her and didn't understand his feelings because he was hurt and felt lied to and all of that. And the emperor had to be like, go to her, you dum dum. And I was like, man, can't every man have an emperor to just be like, go do the thing?
Like, go. I think we could all use someone like that. Like, just you don't You don't get an opportunity like this every time. You don't meet a person like this every dynasty. Go do the thing. Try. And if you
Yeah.
fail, that's fine, but at least try. And I think that's kind of another, that's kind of
Sorry, I'm
another,
still crying from laughing.
I think that's another really great message from this movie is to just try. You may not succeed in either. You may not succeed, you may fail, or you just might not succeed in the way you thought you were going to. Going back to the whole, like, perfectionism journey, and even on a healing journey, we have this idea that maybe, like, okay, if we just journal and meditate and do all of these things, we're going to be healed, or even just like go to therapy. Like therapy is going to fix everything, right? Not always the case, because there has to be a lot of like action outside of that. But we may have this idea of how our life is supposed to go, how our journeys are supposed to go, how our healing is supposed to go, who we're supposed to be, what we're supposed to do. And we might end up doing those things. It just might not follow this like cookie cutter timeline or checklist or whatever. And I think when we can try, I think it's an equal balance. So much of what we talk about is like this balance of navigating both and like the gray area and the nuance. But I think when we can try and have desires and expectations, but not cling to them so tightly, it allows for natural growth. Like the natural inertia of things to unfold can happen when we are in that uncomfortable both and, because it would be so nice to know exactly how things are supposed to go and what decisions we're supposed to make, because I think we put so much pressure on like whether or not a decision is like right or wrong or whatever. My philosophy and kind of the way I talk to clients about these kinds of things is just like, if we just treat a decision like a decision, and understanding that we are making this decision with the information we have on hand, and making this decision with our best intentions in mind, and we move forward trusting that no matter what happens, we are fully capable, whole, and resourceful to tackle it, I think can hopefully take a lot of pressure off of whether or not it's right or wrong. Because
Yeah.
again, it's so easy to fall into that black or white thinking of right and wrong, or this or that, either or, this one or that, anyway.
Mhm.
But there can be so much liberation in both and in the gray area and the nuance in this like really uncomfortable space. And I think in doing that too, we're breaking a lot of cycles and we are being disruptors, even if it's not like outward disruption. I think even doing quote unquote something small like that can really break up a lot of cycles.
I love it. I agree.
But let's see. Well, we're on the subject of themes. I think, a big one that we've touched on without outrightly naming it is identity. I mean, there's a whole song about this, right? Like, when will my
Yeah.
reflection show who I am inside? And also there's a line that I wrote down. Now I see that if I were truly to be myself, I would break my family's heart. And I'm like, because I think that's like a human experience we can all relate to, right? Is
Who you are versus who people want you to be, or
yes,
how you should,
exactly. And so
quote
much
unquote,
of
should.
and so much of healing, I think, is reconnecting to like your authentic self. Especially as recovering perfectionists and recovering people pleasers, we have to take a look at the identities that we have put on and the masks that we have put on to appease and please other people, and realize whether or not it makes us happy, whether or not it's serving us anymore, because there is a lot of survival tied into that, right? I'm not, of course, nothing we ever say on here is to like shame anybody. But sometimes we do have to take stock of these things and be honest with ourselves about, like, what, this isn't working, this is not who I want to be. And yeah, if you change or break out of that role in certain relationships, you might disappoint people. But I think there's a quote by Glennon Doyle, and I know it's like so overused, but it is so true, of like, if you're going to disappoint anyone, don't disappoint yourself.
Yeah, I think there's also a lot to be said in terms of that identity as like how you view yourself versus how other people view you too, because she's
Totally.
letting a lot of her sort of identity crisis, for lack of a better word, be defined by how others are perceiving her, right? It's like, you know, she in a way, once she goes to war, she's sort of able to just let go and be whoever she wants to be because she's being something fictional. And the only
Mm,
thing that she's really hiding is the fact that she's a woman, and everything else, she's sort of just able to be herself. She's finally allowed to speak her mind. She's finally being listened
mm-hmm.
to and seen and like heard, and in a way that's like very liberating, right? And so like this whole identity crisis before that is like, you know, people aren't listening to me, they're not taking me seriously, and like it's so common for us to like let external factors define like how we see ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, something that I work with a lot with my clients is when it comes to like body image too, is like a lot of people define themselves so much by how they look and how they are perceived in the world. um and I think that this movie, although it's not about body image in the traditional sense, it kind of is in a different way of sort of like she's being perceived as a man and finally being taken seriously, but in a different way, sort of taking it and being like, you know, I'm still going to live my life because I deserve to live my life regardless of what my body looks like, you know? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's also something that can be taken away from this, even if it's not directly related or taken away.
No, that's such a beautiful. I love that. That's a very beautiful takeaway and message, and I hope that whoever needed to hear that did, because that was really powerful. Um Snaps to you, HB. Snaps to you.
Thanks. Sometimes I just like sometimes these things just come to me, you know. That's why I don't write anything down, but I'm glad that you write things down so that I can have at least some sort of structure.
I got you. I got you, boo. Just real quick on the subject of reflection, there's that line where she's like, when will my reflection show who I am inside? And I love that that's paralleled with her looking at her reflection on the mountain. And I know that she's looking at herself in a very negative way, but truly that reflection is showing her who she is, right? With her like her short hair, no makeup, and her having accomplished some like really, really cool things, and in a lot of ways like regaining her honor, which leads into another theme that we've touched on here and there, again without naming it outrightly, but I think honor is definitely a very big theme, which also ties into family and culture and tradition and perfectionism and identity, right? Like you were saying, I think she was definitely basing a lot of her worth and her identity in this external thing which she thought would have her honor, very much like how we talked about with Maui. His hook was his identity and his worth and his honor. Thor was meow meow. I can't ever say that. Neil meow meow meow.
Moliere.
And for her, she's like
Mjolnir.
in search of that external thing, trying to find it and claim it and stuff. And it also reminds me of another Avatar reference, because these are like two of my favorite things. It reminds me of Zuko when he's like, my honor. We're gonna watch it, HB. We're gonna watch it, so you'll understand all of these
I'm just
references.
sitting here nodding my head like, yeah, sure, great,
Mm-hmm,
good.
mm-hmm, and
I
that's
love
cool.
that for you. I love that journey for you.
Honor was another thing that Moana had to deal with, but I think in different than Moana, in that her parents never outrightly put so much pressure on her or like doubted her ability to be a chief. They just wanted her to be prepared. But for Mulan, it feels like not just her family, but like her entire community is counting on her and also these other girls to like maintain their family's honor. But I do like that by the end of the movie, yes, she has all of these like external things and all of these long list of accomplishments, but I really love that her father just kind of like throws it all to the side, and he reminds her, or not even reminds her, but just validates that her honor has always been within herself, and that she didn't necessarily need to prove or like show these things. And again, tying that back to perfectionism, especially in a society that kind of bases value and worth like based on a piece of paper. I mean, I'm just thinking of like the workplace, like whether or not you're good enough for a job based on your paper trail and that
a
sort of,
degree.
yeah, a degree, or even like dating apps, like, it's very superficial. And it's a very complicated thing because I have mixed feelings about dating apps. It's a great tool, it's convenient, but also it's a little shallow. Anyway, that's not the topic of today's conversation.
We
But
could though, because I am on them right now,
we
so we
truly
could.
could. I think as recovering perfectionists, we put so much weight on the things we do and how well we do them. And whenever we talk about perfectionism recovery, I'm not saying like don't try. I'm not saying don't do your best. I think it's about being able to do our best, being comfortable with the effort and capacity that we have to give, and knowing that it doesn't, like, it does not dictate our worth, or that the result and response we get from our hard work doesn't always dictate how good of a person we are. I think so much of what we're talking about is separating and kind of compartmentalizing our innate, inherent worth and value and honor, and the things that we kind of like have to do in this, in this world to maintain community and survive and live and all of that stuff. But then just like separating it so that the external things don't hold so much weight on our internal things.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like I said, I think I said this earlier in the podcast, just like talking about myself, I pretty much said that like fitness is my identity, right? But if I lose fitness, like I'm still going to be who I am,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I'm still going to be myself at my core. It's just that it's so ingrained into who I am right now that like, it's because it's like a habit. It's something it's like what I do for work. It's what I work, like it's the lens that I look at things through for the
Yes.
most part, right? And of course, if I lost that, it would be difficult and I would have a whole like grieving journey, whatever. But it does not define who I am at my core. Like I am not fitness at my core. Right.
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Fitness is a thing that you're passionate about, and it's a thing that you do. It's not like who you are. And I think that's
yeah.
so important. Like, I think it's a very important distinction for so many of us to come to, is like the things you do. No, I should take that back. Let me reword that. Like, your career and stuff is not, doesn't always have to be who you are. I know you can have pride in the things that you do, and it does not have to be your identity, because like you said, like if that goes away, then we have, it can be very overwhelming to have that like kind of flipped around. And the reason why I reworded that is because I do think our actions do kind of reflect who we are, but that's a different conversation. um
um,
would you like to jump into, we talked about like journeys, we talked about themes, would you like to jump into some of our favorite things from the movie?
yeah, I do just want to say before we get into that that
Totally.
I am impressed with how like the plot of this movie and how quickly like I feel like modern Disney movies are so drawn out, and maybe that's just like me being jaded or whatever, but like do we really need 2.5 hours or 2 hours to explain the plot of a movie? Like
Thank you. I
Mulan is
agree.
so concise, and it's just like it really like when it was over, I was like, wow, that like I feel like plot points in Disney movies today, like modern Disney movies, are really drawn out. And an example that is not drawn out in Mulan that I was expecting to be more drawn out because I'm used to modern Disney
Mm-hmm,
movies
mm-hmm.
is the reveal of her being a woman. It's so quick. It's so like when everybody finds out, it's literally just like, oh, she was injured. Oh, you're a woman. Oh, I'm upset. Oh, I'm not going to kill you. Oh, we're leaving. Let's move on. But I feel like in a modern Disney movie, it would have been so dramatic and so drawn out, and there would have been like made a big deal about it. So I do love how quickly plot points were sort of pushed in older Disney movies. And like it was just sort of like, let's get to the next thing. Let's get to the next thing. Where I'm sort of like, makes sense. It's for kids. It's like a kids movie. Like you could make a point without hammering it into someone's head, right? We already knew she was a woman. We didn't need to and so I did love that. I felt like this movie went by very quickly and that it got all the points across that it needed to very efficiently. Um, and so I appreciated that about this. But
Mm-hmm,
if we're going to talk
mm-hmm.
about favorites. I had a lot of favorite quotes. I wrote down a lot. I think one of my favorite moments is after she's been in the water and she finally gets out and she's like, I never want to see another naked man again. And then like hundreds of men run by. It's like so funny. But I
Yes.
think I also talked about some of my other like more deeper favorite quotes about, like Mushu
Mm-hmm.
being supportive of
Mm-hmm.
her, telling her that she's beautiful. Dishonor on you, dishonor on your cow. Those kinds of quotes. Very, very funny. Pretty much anything Mushu says made me laugh a lot. Or when her mom, not her mom, when she comes back from the war and her grandma sees Li Shang for the first time and is like, sign me up for the next war. I was like, yeah, that's me too, grandma.
Would you like to stay for dinner? Would you like to stay forever? That's like my one of my favorite parts. It's so
um,
funny.
yeah, and then they're like, you the man. Well, sort of. I'm like, yeah, all of these are like very hilarious to me. But I do think that like I think that the quote that you have, which if I can find it, is also like the most. Oh no, you don't have it. Never mind. Okay,
Mm,
I'll read it. I'll read
mhm,
mine.
mhm, mhm,
Um it's the one that's on your mug. The flower that
mhm.
blooms in adversity is the most rare and beautiful of all. I just think that's a really it's a really beautiful quote, and it's something to like really think about because, you know, we do bloom under hard times. That's like when you learn the most about yourself, how you function, who you are, who you want to be. Um, and so yeah, I just really
Yeah.
love that quote. So that
Tests
was like
your
800 quotes.
yeah. It really tests
Here's
your
every
metal.
quote from the movie.
Yeah, let's word for word start. Okay, here we go. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know if I could. I feel like I've watched it enough times I should be able to, but that's fine. No, all of those were fantastic. It's a very funny and good movie. Lots of good nuggets in there.
Oh, another quote I really like is from the Emperor. It's at the very beginning. It's foreshadowing the whole rest of the movie, but he says, a single grain of rice can tip the scale. One man may be the difference between victory and defeat. And had Mulan not been there, they would have lost the war. So,
I do
boom.
like the way that's set up where he says that and immediately it pans to the rice. And you think that's the thing that they're talking about, but it's actually Milan. She's the grain of rice. She's the man that's gonna tip the scales. Oh, I do like
Yes.
that part. I do like the part.
Yes.
Um, for me and my favorite quotes, I mean it's the entire movie, but I really like the quote. It's the scene where her mom and grandma are waiting for Mulan to show up, and the mom's like super worried, and she's like, I should have prayed to the ancestors for luck. And the grandma's like, how lucky can they be? They're dead.
Yes. Love that.
I love
So good.
the grandma's so, oh, it was cheeky the right word. She's so funny. And I don't know if you've seen the sequel. Have you seen Mulan too?
I have not seen Mulan too.
It's it's okay, mixed feelings because I feel like a lot of the Disney like straight to DVD sequels were actually kind of underrated. Like the I'm thinking of Cinderella 2 with Anastasia and her meeting the guy. I don't know if you've seen that one either. That one's actually pretty
No,
cute. Um
no.
Lion King
I've
2.
seen Lion King 1.5. That's one of my favorite Disney movies.
It's so good. It's so funny. The second one is pretty good
Yeah.
too. My best friend hates it, but I think it's really good. Like, I don't know. I think the villain is very I was going to say Machiavellian, but I feel like not as sophisticated as that. But the music slaps the anyway, Mulan 2, the grandma is also very funny and but if we want to talk about like self-serving, Mushu is actually very selfish in that. And it's one of the reasons I don't love it, but I think it has also a really interesting message. Anyway, going back to our favorite thing. So quotes, that's like my favorite quote that makes me laugh out loud every single time. The message of yes, the flower that blooms in adversity is the most rare and beautiful of all. I have that on a mug. I have my boyfriend made or ordered this thing on Etsy. It's like a pencil holder and it has that like burned into because it's made of wood. So it's like burned or carved into it. I'm sure I have that on so many things. I kind of want a tattoo of it, but I'm not really sure. I don't have like quotes. I
You
have like
should,
little symbols.
your tattoo should just be a flower from the
A
from the tree.
magnolia. Yeah, I've been
Yeah.
thinking about that one too. So, but I've been thinking like maybe I'll do like her sword, like that could be kind of like her sword with the, I don't know. Anyway, um but if we want to talk about favorite moments, I have so many. Actually, there weren't as many as I thought. But in that same scene where the mom and grandma are waiting for her and Mulan finally shows up and she just goes, "I'm here." She jumps off her horse and she's
I'm
like,
here.
"I'm here." And then later on, when the matchmaker calls her name and she's like, "Present." And they're like, "No." She's like, "Oh, crap. I'm
You're not
supposed to-"
supposed to talk.
Yeah. And then her climbing, HB, her climbing over the table to get the teacup. She doesn't stand up and walk around the table. She just goes straight over the table to get the teacup. And I'm like, this girl is
Yes.
so funny. She's so smart, but sometimes she's just like, why are you doing the thing? When she's trying to hock a loogie to like prove what kind of like she's a man or whatever in front of all these
Oh
people. And
yeah.
she's like,
And it just hangs there. Oh
yeah,
no.
yeah. And then also when the Huns start popping out of the snow like daisies, and she's like, "Well, I have to do something," and that really reminded me of Moana, of like, I can't just sit by and know that these things are happening and not do something about it. But then my one of my
Yeah.
most favorite lines or scenes is when she confronts Li Shang in the city, and she's trying to tell them like the Huns are back. You have to listen to me, and she's like, you said you trust Ping. Why is Mulan any different? And I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. I love that too. And it's like, yeah, well, you were pretending to be a man, so maybe a little bit, but
Yeah, you did kind of lie about something, so it makes sense he didn't trust you. However, yeah.
yeah,
Do you have a favorite
it's true.
scene? I know we just talked about like our favorite lines and stuff, but do you have a favorite scene?
Um, no, pretty much everything I mentioned was like part of my favorite scenes. So if you can imagine like what happens around them, I think they're all my favorite. I do like the montage where she's like becoming a man, like, getting ready to go to the war, where she like cuts her hair and all of that. And if you pay attention to the music, which we can talk about more in our music episode, it's very 90s. It is the most like
Yes.
90s music. Like I was like, "Oh God, this did not age well. This like power she's changing herself music did not
Dun,
age well."
dun, 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 dun. Yeah, it's so funny. And then even, well, 90s, 98, 96, 94 degrees, that band with Nick Lachey, they did the
98 degrees, yes.
98 degrees, thank you. They did the credit song, which we'll talk about
Yeah.
more, but I every time I have to stop the movie. I don't like that song. I actually really don't.
Oh,
I
really?
know you're like jamming to it, and I'm like, "Mm."
I love that song.
I
I
like
love 98 degrees though.
as soon as the movie's over, I have to turn it off before it hits that song. I don't know why. It just like,
Yeah, you didn't even put it on the list. I was like, how rude. I had to put the song on the song list because you didn't write it down. I was like, she didn't put True to Your Heart by 98 Degrees on our song list. What a betrayal.
so much. I really don't like that song, but that's okay.
That's so funny. It's your favorite Disney movie and you don't like the end credit song.
Mm-mm.
Crazy.
It's crazy. I do okay for I don't like the live action, not because it's like I tried so hard to separate my love, again, my love and the nostalgia for the 98 Mulan, the live action. When even if you do that, it's not a great movie. But however, I do really like Christina Aguilera's like Strong, Brave, and True song or whatever it's called. At my work, it plays on the radio a lot, and I'm like, okay, this is a bop. So I would love if they could swap out True to Your Heart for that song. Anyway, we're not talking about that right now. We're going back to favorite scenes. So my favorite scene my favorite scene in the movie is when she is on the mountain and she's looking at her reflection and she's doing a lot of self-reflecting and a lot of introspection. And she says, maybe I didn't go for my father. Maybe what I really wanted was to prove I could do things right. So when I looked in the mirror, I'd see someone worthwhile. And the Mushu was like, you just need to clean your mirror off. That's all. But I think
Yeah.
so much of this movie is built upon Mulan's desire and need to prove herself, that she's good enough, that she can do things right, when so much of the beginning of the movie is her like doing things quote unquote like wrong, like speaking out of turn, being late,
Being
um
clumsy.
Yeah, being clumsy. I do love, and this is where like she's very clever and funny, is when she runs up to her father and she's like, "Your tea," but they run into each other and so it breaks, or the cup breaks, and she like pulls another cup out from behind her dress and she's like, I brought a spare." um
She
yeah,
knows herself. A woman who knows herself.
exactly. But I think so. I think that desire and need to prove and to like do things and show everyone like, hey, like I am good enough. Look at, I can do these things is a human experience we can definitely all relate to. And I think if Mulan were my friend, which in my brain she totally is, I would just try to remind her of all the things that she has accomplished, of the amazing feats that she did accomplish, what she did do well, like join the army and become their best warrior fighter. Yeah. But I think we
She
touched on,
took down an entire army of Huns
yeah, like what? In a very
single-handedly.
single-handedly and in a very creative way, right? Like Shang is like, aim the cannon at Shawn Yu, and she's like, or we kill everyone.
Exactly.
So I really love this
Yeah,
movie. I really love her as a princess. And then my other favorite scene, just real quick, in the end, when we talked about this, but in the end when she is presenting gifts to her father, it's less about like, look at me, look at, I'm so proud of myself, or I mean she is proud of herself, but I think it's less of like arrogance and it's more of like humility. And she's like, look, I did this thing and I did this thing, and I know like you're really upset, but you know, I hope I made you proud. And I do like that her father is able to validate and acknowledge and comfort her and say like, you did more than enough, like because you have always been enough. And I'm like, yeah, okay, anyway.
yeah. I think that like what you were saying about her, like what you would say to her if you were her friend. I think that we can all remind ourselves, like in terms of like how we are speaking to ourselves when we're feeling that way, is like, would you speak to a friend this way if we're being especially self-deprecating?
Truly, though, I think when we're talking about the inner critic and all of those limiting beliefs and stuff, a tactic that some people use is talking to themselves like they would a friend, because I think it's so much easier, right? Like it's so easy to tell your friend like, no, you are good enough, like you've done amazing things, like I love you, I value you. And it's so much harder to redirect a lot of that because of our inner critic and those like really deeply rooted limiting beliefs. But when we can at least try talking to ourselves like a friend, or um kind of like taking a step back, zooming out, and like having like visualizing like, okay, here's me and here's myself again as a friend, you know, let's talking to each other. It can be an easier way to allow the compassionate inner voice to take front and center versus letting the inner critic kind of lead that internal conversation. Um, yeah.
Definitely.
I had some other just like fun little notes if we want to go over that before we wrap up. Um, I,
Sure.
oh, actually, wait, going back to favorites, did you have a favorite character?
Um, I don't know. I would say, I mean, like Mulan is pretty great. You know, Li Shang is hot. Uh, but I think eh, Cricky and the horse very underrated.
Mm-hmm.
Mushu very supportive, which I'm surprised to hear that he's not in part two. That's annoying. Because like I just think that was just it was such a surprise to see in this, to sort of be like, wow, this like really arrogant little bearded dragon whatever is like so supportive of her,
Truly.
like
And
genuinely.
yeah, and I think his growth and his journey isn't something we had time to touch on, but like he goes through his own growth and development and journey as well, from this like very self-serving, arrogant um dragon thing, to being, yeah, very supportive and encouraging and loving.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, so I would just say like I think I like all of the characters. I don't have like a specific favorite, but I think that they all serve a very great purpose and work well together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I don't have a. I guess if I had to choose a favorite, it would be Mulan. Hence
Makes
all of
sense.
the stuff. My other notes, which I'll just kind of breeze through real quick, is other than, yes, thank you for your note, other than the general dying, no parent or grandparent dies, which was refreshing and nice. There are some big differences between the Disney version and the original ballad. Screen Rant compared the differences between the movie and the original poem, so check that out. And then I had a note on like representation and appropriation, but I think that's a conversation. It's a bigger conversation to be had, and probably an episode in and of itself. But again, just like we've talked about, we've been talking about, I think it's a lot of like both and situations. Like this was one of the first Disney movies to have a person of color lead, and it was culturally significant. And the way they went about making the movie wasn't great, from diverting far from the original poem to appropriation to actually the reasons why they hired Eddie Murphy as the voice of Mushu. If you want to look into it, you
Mm.
can. It's not great, and there is a lot of stereotyping, etc., etc. This movie is far from
Yeah.
perfect, but I think there's something to be said about, enjoying something while also acknowledging its faults. Just kind of like how we talked about with Harry Potter, intention over impact and all of that stuff. And um, yeah, that's my little other notes, tacking
Yeah.
on disclaimer, asterisk, all that stuff.
No, yeah. I think it is important to bring up because like I feel like for most of this podcast we've been like praising the movie and like, oh, it's so feminist and oh, it's so this and oh,
Mm,
it's so that. And like there are faults. But we're not necessarily here to talk about those. We're here to talk about how you can help this movie with how this movie can help you with your own like healing journey, personal development, why people might turn to it in hard times and like, you know, acknowledging that it is not perfect is very important. So,
yes.
yeah.
Alrighty. Well, I think that is everything on my end. HB, do you feel complete with this one?
I sure do. I also do want to say though that like even though she has a quote unquote love interest,
Mhm.
it's not really like, you know, they don't
It's not
get like
the main meal, the
folk.
main course. Yeah.
Yeah. So I appreciated that too because I know that when I was talking about Moana, like one of the reasons that I really loved that is that her plot is not driven by love interest either. And, neither is Mulan. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
even though he exists and right like he's really hot, so I don't blame her, but like,
Yes, yes. And I do kind of like how I've seen a lot of posts on this, how like their relation, like both Mulan and Shang are kind of like bi icons or can be seen that way depending on how you look at it. There's also,
mm.
I saw this post. Let me see if I can find it and I'll send it to you later. There's this really funny post. I think it was on Tumblr or Instagram. I don't know. But it's the scene when he grabs Mulan by the or Ping. He grabs Ping by the her collar or whatever, and they're like the movie would have been over if he just looked down because in her
Oh, yeah. Well,
but
yeah,
any
I mean, like I looked up notes about their relationship because I was really like, you don't know what happens. It's kind of ambiguous. Maybe if you watch Mulan 2, which I have not done, maybe they're together. I don't know. But
I'm just
but
nodding my
like
head
it's
like
kind of
it's a Mulan too.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's kind of ambiguous what happens with them and it is like he does kind of fall for her or at least respects her and has, uh develops a personal relationship with her while she is quote unquote a man. So
Yes.
it's interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, big fan of the movie. If you haven't seen it, please go watch it. We should have said this at the beginning, but this is meant to be spoiler free. Or if there were parts that you really like that we talked about or that we even didn't touch on, you are welcome to email us at mhm.thepodcast@gmail.com. If you are interested in the book that we were talking about, or the books, I suppose, Permission to Come Home by Dr. Jenny Wong, I will drop a link in the show notes where you can buy it, and we will also get a small kickback along with Simu Liu's book, We Were Dreamers. And we will, yeah, yeah. We will see you next time, I suppose. Also, you can join our Patreon for bonus content such as the musical breakdown, a workout inspired by Mulan as well as Moana, and yeah.
Yeah. That's us. That's what we got.
Yay. All right, guys, we will see you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Mental Health Multiverse podcast and for spending time with us, HB and LB. Special shout out to our musical composer, Little HB.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, feel free to share it with others, post about it on social media, leave a rating and review, or become an exclusive Patreon member to see bonus and additional content.
To stay up to date on all things MHM, you can follow us on Instagram at Heather Bodie and at littlebit_notbroken, or subscribe to our YouTube channel to see our faces and watch some fun bloopers. You can find all of these links in the show notes.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.